never planned to end up in Eldridge, a name I hadn't even heard whispered until I found myself lost on a winding road surrounded by dense, whispering trees. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that danced eerily on the pavement, and the chill in the air hinted at something off-kilter. As I drove, my car sputtered ominously, its engine protesting as if sensing the unease that loomed. I spotted a sign half covered in vines, its letters faded and cracked. Eldridge, population unknown. The town seemed to beckon with an unsettling allure, so I pulled over, convinced that a brief stop wouldn't hurt. Eldridge appeared abandoned at first glance. The streets were devoid of life, shops with dusty windows stared blankly at me, and the only sound was the wind stirring the remnants of fallen leaves. I stepped out, a shiver running down my spine as I took a hesitant step into this eerie quiet. Curiosity drew me further in. I noticed a few townsfolk, their faces pale and expressions vacant, milling about. They looked at me with eyes that held stories, yet their lips remained sealed. I tried to greet them, but my voice echoed back, swallowed by the heavy silence. Each glance from them felt like a warning, yet I couldn't decipher what they knew that I didn't. As I wandered deeper, I stumbled upon a quaint cafe, its sign swinging gently despite the stillness. I approached, hoping for some warmth and perhaps answers. Inside, the air was stale, thick with a sense of abandonment. An elderly woman stood behind the counter, her eyes scanning me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. I ordered a coffee and she nodded, moving without a word. While waiting, I scanned the room and noticed faded photographs on the walls. Each picture portrayed a scene from the town, decades old but unnervingly untouched by time. A group of people stood in one, all smiling, but those eyes were hollow, as if the life had been siphoned from them. As I took a sip of the bitter coffee, a chill crept through the cafe. The front door swung open, and a gust of wind rushed in, carrying with it a faint whisper that seemed to swirl around me, forming words just out of reach. The townsfolk turned their gaze toward the door, and for a moment I felt as if I were being watched by something far beyond the surface of their silence. Then, in the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. A shadow flitted past the window, quick and unsettling. My heart raced. I stood to investigate, but the moment I reached the door, the elderly woman shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. I hesitated, torn between the urge to flee and the lure of the unknown. And then, as if sensing my indecision, the town began to whisper secrets, dark and twisted. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of my descent into the heart of Eldridge, where silence was not merely the absence of sound, but a shroud concealing something far more sinister. I stepped back from the door, feeling the weight of the elderly woman's warning pressing down on me. The townsfolk remained still, their gazes boring into me, a collective gaze filled with an unspoken understanding that I was blissfully unaware of. Determined to learn more, I decided to explore the streets of Eldridge further. I walked past the cafe, the thick silence wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. Each step felt heavier, as if the ground itself was resisting my presence. The quaint buildings loomed around me, their facades peeling and cracked, whispering tales of forgotten days. As I wandered, I spotted an old bookstore, its windows fogged over. The wooden door creaked ominously as I entered, the smell of musty pages and something else, something acrid, filling the air. The shop was dimly lit, shadows flitting across the walls as if alive. Books lined the shelves, their spines cracked and faded, but as I scanned the titles, something strange caught my eye. Volumes with no authors or dates, just cryptic symbols etched in gold. My heart quickened. I pulled one off the shelf, its cover feeling cool to the touch, and opened it. Inside, the pages were blank. Confused, I flipped through more books, each one identical, void of words. A creeping dread settled in my stomach. It was as if the town wanted to keep its secrets hidden, and I was intruding upon something ancient and terrible. Just then, a rustling noise came from the back of the store. I turned, half expecting to see the shopkeeper, but instead I found a door slightly ajar. Curiosity pulled me closer, and as I pushed it open, a cold breeze rushed past me, carrying the faintest echo of a voice, one that called my name, soft yet insistent. Before I could retreat, I stepped into a narrow hallway lined with more closed doors. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of disembodied voices that seemed to swirl around me, beckoning me to listen. I pressed my ear against one door, the wood feeling damp beneath my skin, and heard muffled cries, pleas for help that faded as quickly as they came. My heart raced, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I turned to leave, but the door I entered through had vanished, replaced by an unyielding wall. Panic surged within me as I realized I was trapped. The whispers intensified, and the air thickened, making it hard to breathe. I could feel the presence of something looming just beyond the shadows, something that thrived in the silence. Suddenly, the door at the end of the hallway creaked open, revealing a figure cloaked in darkness. They stepped forward, and the flickering light illuminated their face, a mask of serene calmness devoid of emotion. They extended a hand, beckoning me closer. "Stay silent, traveler," they whispered, their voice echoing in my mind rather than my ears. "The city listens, and it remembers." The weight of their words sank deep into my chest. I could feel the walls closing in around me, the very fabric of Eldridge tightening its grip, and I knew that I had stumbled upon something I wasn't prepared to face. With a surge of determination, I turned and dashed back down the hallway, my heart pounding as I searched for an exit. The whispers grew frantic, a warning now echoing through the darkness. As I burst back into the bookstore, the old woman was gone. The door stood open, beckoning me outside. I sprinted through it, the world outside spinning wildly into focus. But the townsfolk were still there, watching, and the weight of their silence pressed down on me. Little did I know, the true horror of Eldridge was just beginning to unfurl, and the silence I thought was oppressive was merely a prelude to the chilling truth hidden within its shadows. Outside, the air felt alive with an unsettling energy. I stood on the threshold of the bookstore, panting as I tried to make sense of what just happened. The townsfolk continued to observe, their faces unreadable, yet there was a flicker of something in their eyes. Fear? Recognition? As I walked back toward the main street, I couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see that cloaked figure looming behind me, but the path was empty. The eerie silence of Eldridge was oppressive, each step I took echoing like a heartbeat against the stillness. I turned into a side alley, desperate to find something, anything that would offer answers. The buildings were tall and shadowy, closing in on me like a set of ancient giants. The alley opened up to a small square, its centerpiece a decrepit fountain that had long since run dry. Statues encircled the square, each one frozen in a pose of despair, their expressions twisted in anguish. As I approached the fountain, something glinted beneath the layer of dust, an object, half buried in the debris. I knelt down, brushing aside the grime to reveal an ornate key. Its surface was cold, and as I picked it up, a shiver raced through me. What did it unlock? Suddenly I heard soft footsteps approaching. I turned quickly, and there stood a young girl, her eyes wide and vacant, yet somehow pleading. She stared at me, her lips moving silently as if she was trying to form words but couldn't. I felt an overwhelming urge to understand, to bridge the gap that separated us. "Are you trapped here?" I managed to ask, my voice a fragile thread in the oppressive quiet. She nodded slowly, the motion almost imperceptible. I glanced at the key in my hand, the weight of it now feeling like a lifeline. "Do you know what this is for?" I asked, hoping she could somehow break through the silence that enveloped us. Her gaze flickered to the far corner of the square, where a small weathered door was partially hidden behind ivy. It was a doorway I hadn't noticed before, and something about it felt charged with possibility. The girl's expression urged me to take action, to uncover whatever secrets lay beyond. I took a step toward the door, but before I could move further, a loud clamor erupted from the other side of the square. The townsfolk began to stir, their bodies shifting in a coordinated wave, blocking the path I had just come from. They moved with a purpose, their eyes locked onto me as if I were prey cornered in a trap. Heart pounding, I glanced back at the girl. She had vanished. My mind raced. I had no time to waste. I sprinted toward the door, heart thundering in my chest. As I reached for the handle, I could feel the presence of the townsfolk closing in behind me, a heavy, suffocating silence enveloping the square. The door creaked open, revealing a dark staircase that spiraled downward. I hesitated for a heartbeat, the instinct to flee warring with the insatiable curiosity that had driven me this far. Then, with the weight of the townsfolk's gaze pressing down, I plunged into the darkness below, the door slamming shut behind me. The air grew colder as I descended, the musty smell of damp stone and decay filling my lungs. I felt like I was diving deeper into the heart of Eldridge, away from the oppressive silence above and into something far darker. Each step echoed ominously, a reminder of the secret I was about to unveil, if I was brave enough to confront it. The darkness wrapped around me like a shroud as I descended the spiraling staircase. Each step felt precarious, the old stone slick beneath my feet, and I gripped the railing, half expecting it to crumble away. My heart pounded in rhythm with the echoes of my footfalls, a steady drumbeat of impending dread. At the bottom, I emerged into a cavernous chamber dimly lit by flickering torches mounted on the walls. Shadows danced wildly, morphing into grotesque shapes that seemed to twist in the flickering light. The air was thick with moisture and something acrid, a scent that clawed at my throat. In the center of the room stood an ancient stone pedestal, its surface etched with cryptic symbols that pulsed with an eerie glow. Above it, the ceiling arched high, disappearing into darkness. I felt a pull toward the pedestal, an irresistible urge to uncover the secrets it held. As I approached, the glow intensified, illuminating the contours of the room. The symbols seemed to shift under my gaze, a language that whispered ancient truths. I placed the key on the pedestal, its cold surface contrasting with the warmth of the glow, and watched as the symbols responded. They rearranged, forming words that resonated in my mind. Sacrifice binds the silence. A chill ran down my spine. The words felt like a curse, laden with ominous weight. I backed away, but as I turned, I noticed something in the shadows. The outline of figures, cloaked and indistinct, emerging from the darkness. The townsfolk. Their expressions were blank, yet their presence exuded a palpable sense of menace. "Why are you doing this?" I called out, my voice trembling in the cavern. The figures moved closer, a collective force that emanated an unsettling harmony. They were silent, but their eyes gleamed with a knowing that pierced through the darkness. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The walls trembled as if awakening from a long slumber. The pedestal shook, and I stumbled back, my heart racing. In the shadows, I could make out whispers, a cacophony that rose and fell like a tide, but the words were incomprehensible, swirling around me like a tempest. One of the figures stepped forward, and I recognized the cloak, the same one worn by the figure in the bookstore. The hood fell back, revealing the face of the woman who had served me coffee earlier. Her features were eerily serene, but there was an intensity in her gaze that rooted me to the spot. "Your arrival was foretold," she spoke, her voice echoing as if it were the chorus of the shadows. "You have crossed the threshold, and now you must choose. Will you silence your own truth to join us, or will you uncover the horrors we guard?" A sense of desperation clawed at me. I glanced at the pedestal, the symbols still pulsating with energy, promising either salvation or doom. The townsfolk closed in, their intent unclear, but the weight of their gaze felt heavy, pressing upon me like a physical force. In that moment, clarity washed over me. I had to escape Eldridge, to uncover the truth hidden beneath its surface, to break the cycle of silence that bound its people. I seized the key from the pedestal, feeling its cool metal resonate with determination. The whispers swelled, a warning now layered with urgency. I turned, racing toward the far wall where a narrow passageway seemed to beckon. As I sprinted, the figures moved to intercept me, their silent pursuit a chilling reminder of the stakes. The whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts, urging me to flee. I burst through the passage, my heart hammering as I dashed down a winding corridor, the shadows reaching out as if to snare me. Behind me, the cacophony of whispers rose to a deafening crescendo, echoing through the darkened halls of Eldridge. And in that moment of chaos, I knew the silence I had encountered was merely the beginning, a prelude to something far more terrifying that awaited me, lurking just beyond the veil of the known. The narrow corridor twisted and turned like a serpent, the stone walls closing in on me as I raced deeper into the heart of Eldridge. Each footfall echoed ominously, my breath quickening as I pushed myself to move faster. The whispers behind me were relentless, an eerie symphony that urged me onward while warning me of the darkness pursuing. I rounded a corner and stumbled into a small chamber, the air thick with dust and the remnants of what once might have been a gathering place. Old banners hung limply from the walls, their once vibrant colors faded to a mournful gray. At the center lay an altar strewn with remnants of offerings, broken trinkets and wilted flowers, tokens of lost hopes. I paused for just a moment, catching my breath, but the urgency of my situation clawed at me. I could feel the chill creeping closer, an icy dread that clung to my skin. Without thinking, I grabbed one of the wilted flowers, its petals brittle and dry, and tossed it onto the altar. It was a desperate gesture, a plea for guidance, but the act felt significant somehow. As the flower landed, a low hum reverberated through the chamber. The walls shuddered, and a dark fissure opened in the stone behind the altar, revealing a hidden passageway. The whispers grew louder, twisting into a cacophony of voices urging me to enter. With no other choice, I sprinted toward the new opening. The corridor was darker than before, the air thick with a musty scent that felt oppressive. The sound of my heartbeat echoed in my ears as I plunged into the darkness, the fissure sealing behind me with a heavy thud. The passage wound downwards, and with each step the whispers morphed into coherent words, a chant rising and falling like a tide. I strained to listen, trying to catch the meaning hidden within the chaos. Beneath the silence lies the truth. Blood for blood, sacrifice for freedom. Fear coursed through me, the weight of their words settling heavily in my chest. What had I stumbled upon? Eldridge was not just a town frozen in time. It was a place steeped in darkness, bound by an ancient curse. I pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. At the end of the passage, I emerged into a vast underground chamber. It was a cavern of stalactites and stalagmites, the ground uneven and treacherous. In the center stood an altar, larger and more imposing than the last, surrounded by a circle of flickering candles that cast eerie shadows against the walls. In the flickering light, I saw figures gathered around the altar, their faces obscured by hoods. They swayed gently, chanting in unison, their voices blending into a haunting melody that resonated through the cavern. My heart raced as I realized this was a ritual, an offering to whatever entity lay beneath the surface of Eldridge. Feeling a mix of fear and resolve, I stepped closer, drawn by the magnetic pull of the altar. The figures turned toward me, their eyes glinting in the candlelight. One figure, taller and more imposing than the rest, stepped forward. The hood fell back, revealing the woman from the cafe, her face now transformed with an unsettling calm. "You seek the truth," she intoned, her voice echoing through the chamber. "But truth demands sacrifice. Will you give what is necessary to break the silence?" A chill raced down my spine. The weight of their gaze pressed on me, the air thick with expectation. The whispers surged around me, a tempest of sound that swirled in a chaotic dance. I looked at the altar, a dark and terrible energy emanating from it, and I felt the urge to flee. But deep down, I knew that facing this truth was the only way to free myself, and perhaps the townsfolk, from the curse that bound them. "Tell me what I must do," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The woman's expression remained inscrutable, but a flicker of approval danced in her eyes. "Join us in the ritual," she said, extending her hand toward the altar. "Embrace the darkness and you may yet find the light." As her words hung in the air, the decision loomed before me, a path that could either lead to salvation or doom. The candles flickered ominously, and I took a deep breath, knowing that whatever choice I made would echo through the very fabric of Eldridge. With the weight of the moment hanging heavily in the air, I hesitated, grappling with the gravity of the choice before me. The cloaked figures, their presence a mix of dread and allure, awaited my response. The murmurs around me swirled like a fog, cloaking reason and fanning the flames of my curiosity. The woman at the altar stepped closer, her gaze piercing through the darkness. "You have already ventured far into our world. Will you now bind yourself to it? Will you become part of Eldridge's cycle?" The phrase cycle echoed ominously in my mind. I had already glimpsed the town's horrors, the whispering shadows, the oppressive silence, the palpable fear etched on the faces of the townsfolk. To be part of that cycle felt like stepping into a nightmare, yet something deeper tugged at me, an insatiable hunger for truth. I stepped forward, my heart racing. "What do I need to do?" The woman smiled, a serene expression that belied the dark purpose surrounding us. "The truth lies in sacrifice. We must offer a piece of ourselves to the darkness that binds Eldridge. Only then can the silence be broken." My pulse quickened as I considered her words. I glanced at the altar, adorned with remnants of past offerings, and knew instinctively that this was not a mere ritual. It was a binding, an exchange that could cost me dearly. Yet the thought of uncovering the town's mysteries, of freeing those trapped within its grasp, propelled me forward. "Show me," I said, determination fueling my voice. "I'll do it." The figures began to chant more fervently, their voices merging into a haunting melody that filled the cavern. The woman gestured to the altar where a dagger lay gleaming in the candlelight. Its blade was etched with the same cryptic symbols that adorned the pedestal. "Make your offering," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. "Let the darkness consume what it desires." I approached the altar, my heart pounding in my chest. The dagger felt cold in my hand as I picked it up, a weighty reminder of the choice I was about to make. I hesitated, the enormity of the moment crashing down upon me. Would this act release the town from its curse, or would it seal my fate forever? The whispers surged, urging me forward. I took a deep breath and pressed the dagger to my palm, wincing as the blade pierced the skin. A sharp pain shot through me, but I focused on the altar, the flickering candles casting eerie shadows around the chamber. As the blood dripped onto the altar, the ground trembled beneath me, and the symbols began to glow brighter, pulsing in time with the heartbeat of the cavern. The chanting intensified, reverberating through the stone, and I felt a strange connection to the energy swirling around me. The darkness that enveloped Eldridge responded, an ancient force awakening to my offering. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the experience, feeling the connection deepen. Visions flashed before me, images of the townsfolk, their faces twisted in despair, and the history of Eldridge unfolding like a dark tapestry. Each scene revealed the town's secret, a cycle of silence and sacrifice that fed a lurking entity, binding them to this cursed existence. Suddenly, the room erupted in a blinding light, illuminating the chamber in a brilliant glow. The cloaked figures recoiled, shielding their eyes, and the woman stepped forward, her expression a mix of awe and fear. "You have awakened the truth," she whispered, the gravity of her words settling heavily. "But this is only the beginning." The light expanded, engulfing the chamber, and I felt myself being pulled into the vortex of energy swirling around me. A voice, a deep, resonant echo, filled my mind, a promise and a warning intertwined. "You will uncover the depths of Eldridge, but know this: the darkness craves more than blood. It hungers for the very essence of your soul." As the light enveloped me, I grasped the magnitude of what I had done. I had chosen to confront the darkness of Eldridge, to expose its hidden horrors, and in doing so, I had become part of its legacy. But I also felt a flicker of hope, a chance to break the cycle and liberate the town from its eerie silence. And then everything faded into darkness. When the blinding light receded, I found myself standing alone in the center of the cavern, the altar now silent, its energy dissipating like mist in the morning sun. The cloaked figures had vanished, leaving me in an unsettling stillness that echoed the silence of Eldridge above. My heart raced, each beat a reminder of the choice I had made. The dagger still clutched in my hand glimmered ominously, the blood that had dripped onto the altar now absorbed into its ancient stone. I felt an unsettling connection to the town, as if my very essence had intertwined with its dark secrets. Yet amidst the fear, a sense of purpose ignited within me. I had a mission, to unveil the truth and free Eldridge from its silent curse. Taking a deep breath, I moved toward the passageway I had entered. The air felt different now, charged with a strange energy that whispered promises of revelation. I retraced my steps through the corridor, the weight of what I had learned hanging heavily in my mind. As I emerged back into the small chamber, I felt the sensation of being watched return. I turned slowly, scanning the dimly lit room, but there was no one there, only the echo of my footsteps reverberating against the stone walls. I could still hear the distant chanting, a soft undertone that seemed to seep from the very essence of Eldridge itself. I left the chamber, stepping into the narrow passage leading back to the town. The silence above was more palpable than ever, as if the town itself held its breath in anticipation of my return. I stepped into the square, the dim light casting elongated shadows, and the townsfolk still stood there, watching, their expressions as inscrutable as before. But now, something had changed within me. I approached them, the key still clutched tightly in my hand, feeling emboldened by my encounter. "I know what binds you to this place," I declared, my voice steady despite the lingering fear. "I want to help you break free." For a moment they merely stared, but then the woman from the cafe stepped forward, her gaze piercing through the veil of silence. "You have seen what we cannot," she said softly, "but the darkness is not easily vanquished. What you have awakened demands more than mere words." "Then tell me what I must do," I replied, determination hardening my resolve. "How can I confront this entity?" The townsfolk began to move, guiding me toward the outskirts of Eldridge, past the decaying buildings and into the dense forest that surrounded the town. The trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches twisted like fingers reaching toward the sky. As we walked, I felt an invisible thread pulling me deeper into the woods, a compass guiding me toward the heart of Eldridge's darkness. We arrived at a clearing, an ancient stone circle surrounded by towering trees. In the center lay a stone slab, its surface etched with the same cryptic symbols that had glowed in the cavern. The townsfolk formed a circle around me, their faces illuminated by the pale light filtering through the canopy. "This is where the entity resides," the woman said, her voice carrying a weight of ancient knowledge. "To confront it, you must invoke its name and reveal the truth you uncovered." I nodded, steeling myself for what lay ahead. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation as I stepped into the center of the stone circle. The symbols on the slab pulsed gently, a heartbeat of the land itself, urging me to begin. Taking a deep breath, I raised my voice, letting the words flow from my lips. "I call upon the essence that binds this town, the darkness that feeds on silence. Reveal yourself." The air around me crackled with energy, and the ground trembled beneath my feet. Shadows twisted and danced, coalescing into a figure cloaked in darkness. It loomed before me, its presence suffocating, a deep void that seemed to swallow the light. "I am the silence," it whispered, a voice like the rustle of dead leaves, echoing in the depths of my mind. "You have awakened me from my slumber. What do you seek?" I stood my ground, the pulse of the stone slab beneath me a reminder of my purpose. "I seek to free the town of Eldridge from your grasp. Your hunger for silence has trapped them in this cycle of despair." The entity laughed, a sound that resonated like thunder through the clearing. "Freedom comes at a cost, traveler. What are you willing to sacrifice?" In that moment, the choice loomed once more, the weight of my blood offering hanging heavy in the air. I had come too far to back down now. "I will face the truth and bear the consequences," I declared, my voice unwavering. As the darkness surged around me, I felt the energy of Eldridge pulsing through my veins. The entity's gaze pierced into my soul, and I prepared myself for the confrontation that would determine the fate of the town, and perhaps my own. The darkness swirled around me like a living entity, its cold tendrils reaching out, probing at the edges of my consciousness. I felt the weight of its gaze, an ancient force that had witnessed centuries of silence and suffering. "You seek to challenge me, but know this. Your will alone cannot shatter the bonds I have woven." With every ounce of courage I could muster, I stepped closer, the stone slab beneath my feet vibrating with the energy of the confrontation. "Your grip on this town is built on fear and silence. I will not let that continue." The entity laughed again, a sound that echoed through the clearing, sending shivers down my spine. "Fear is the essence of power. It is what sustains me. But you have tasted the blood of sacrifice. You know the cost of knowledge." As it spoke, the shadows twisted and flickered, revealing fleeting images, visions of the townsfolk trapped in their own homes, their voices stolen, their lives caught in an endless loop of despair. I felt their pain coursing through me, a visceral reminder of the stakes. I had to find a way to break the cycle. "Your silence will not be unchallenged," I declared, my voice growing stronger. "There is power in the truth. You thrive in the dark, but the light of revelation can shatter even the deepest shadows." The entity recoiled slightly, the shadows momentarily retreating. "Revelation? What do you think you can reveal that I do not already know?" "I know the townsfolk's stories, the sacrifices made in ignorance, the pain buried beneath layers of silence," I replied, feeling the connection to Eldridge's past deepening. "I know that their fear is your fuel, but together we can rewrite their fate." As I spoke, the energy of the stone circle began to resonate with the truth I had uncovered. The symbols pulsed brightly, a vibrant rhythm that drowned out the entity's darkness. I felt the weight of their histories, lost hopes, stolen voices, and unbroken bonds, and channeled that into my words. "You have fed on their fear for too long," I continued, each word gaining strength. "But fear can be transformed into courage. If you release them, they will find their voices again. The cycle of despair can end, and in its place, hope can flourish." For a moment, the darkness faltered, the shadows flickering uncertainly. The air crackled with tension, and I could sense the struggle within the entity, a battle between its instinct to consume and the burgeoning light of hope I had ignited. "You speak of hope," it hissed, its voice a venomous whisper. "But hope is a fragile thing. What assurance do I have that it will last?" I felt a surge of determination, drawing strength from the townsfolk gathered around the clearing. "Hope is not fragile. It is a fire that grows stronger with each act of defiance against despair. Together we can face whatever darkness you unleash." As my words hung in the air, I could feel the tide shifting. The symbols on the stone slab glowed brighter, their pulse synchronizing with the heartbeat of Eldridge itself. The shadows that had once enveloped me began to retreat, as if recoiling from the light I was wielding. The entity's laughter faded, replaced by a low growl of uncertainty. "Very well, traveler. If you believe hope can flourish, then let it be tested. But know that should you fail, the darkness will claim you, and Eldridge will fall deeper into silence." With that, the shadows writhed and twisted, forming a portal behind the entity. I stepped forward, ready to face whatever trials awaited me, the key of truth firmly in my grasp. The townsfolk watched in silent solidarity, their hope rekindling like a flame against the night. As I crossed the threshold into the portal, I felt a rush of energy, a blend of fear and determination. The darkness awaited, but I was no longer alone. I carried the weight of Eldridge's stories and the promise of liberation. And so, I plunged into the unknown, ready to confront the shadows that had held the town captive for far too long. The portal closed behind me with a resonant thud, plunging me into a surreal realm where shadows twisted and writhed like living beings. The air was thick with a palpable darkness, a suffocating fog that obscured my vision. I felt a disorienting pull, as if the very fabric of this place was alive, shifting and changing with each breath I took. I stumbled forward, the ground beneath me uneven and treacherous. The whispers I had heard earlier echoed around me, a chorus of lost souls lamenting their fates, their voices entwined in a mournful dirge. "You seek to challenge the darkness, but do you understand its depths?" They taunted, their tones laced with a blend of sorrow and malice. As I ventured deeper, the shadows coalesced into shapes, figures emerging from the fog, their forms indistinct and shrouded in mystery. I recognized them as reflections of the townsfolk, their faces etched with anguish and despair. Each one seemed to reach out, as if desperate for release, their silent screams filling the air. "Your fear has given me strength," a voice rumbled, resonating from the very shadows themselves. "But you have awakened something in them, a glimmer of hope. Can it withstand the darkness?" With every step, I felt the weight of their sorrow press down on me, a burden of untold stories and unfulfilled lives. "Hope is not fragile," I responded aloud, finding my voice amidst the shadows. "It can rise from the depths, stronger than any fear." The darkness around me flickered, the figures shimmering like mirages, and for a brief moment I saw their eyes, a reflection of the very humanity that bound them to this realm. "Show us," they murmured, their collective voice trembling with anticipation. "Show us that hope can pierce the veil." Summoning my courage, I closed my eyes, tapping into the energy of Eldridge, the stories of love, loss, and resilience that had intertwined to create the town's tapestry. I envisioned the stone circle, the townsfolk united in their silent strength, and the promise of a new dawn breaking through the darkness. "Hope is the fire that ignites the soul," I declared, my voice rising above the whispers. "It burns brighter when shared, and together we can cast away the shadows." As I spoke, the shadows around me began to tremble, flickering with uncertainty. I felt the energy of the stone slab surge within me, and I raised my hands, channeling the hope of the townsfolk and the light that it could bring. The darkness reacted violently, twisting and curling like smoke in a storm. "You think your hope can banish me?" The entity snarled, its voice a low growl. I am the silence that feeds on despair, the darkness that consumes all. But the whispers of the townsfolk grew stronger, coalescing into a chorus of defiance. "We will not be silenced any longer," they cried, their voices uniting, a powerful swell that reverberated through the darkness. With renewed determination, I concentrated on that chorus, the sound resonating deep within me. "Together we stand against you," I shouted, feeling the light of hope rising like a phoenix from the ashes. The shadows began to fracture, splintering under the weight of our combined resolve. In that moment, a blinding light erupted from my hands, casting away the darkness that had clung to me like a shroud. The figures of the townsfolk shimmered with newfound strength, their faces brightening with the light of hope. One by one they stepped forward, merging their essence with mine, creating a radiant beacon that pierced through the shadows. The entity shrieked, a sound that resonated with rage and fear. "No, this cannot be. You will all be consumed." But the light grew stronger, overwhelming the darkness, and I could feel the weight of centuries of despair lifting. The shadows writhed and twisted, but now they were unraveling, the silence giving way to the sound of liberation, a harmony that resonated through the very fabric of Eldridge. As the darkness receded, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. The shadows dissolved into the ether, and the landscape shifted, transforming from a realm of despair into a vibrant expanse filled with the essence of life. The townsfolk stood around me, their faces alight with joy and relief. "We are free," the woman from the cafe whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. "You have broken the cycle." In that moment I realized that the true power of hope lay not just in defiance but in unity. Together we had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, casting aside the chains that had bound us for so long. As the light enveloped Eldridge, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The town was free from the silence, and in its place laughter and life began to flourish once more. But even in that moment of triumph, I knew that darkness would always linger, waiting for the chance to return. The key I held would serve as a reminder, a beacon for the stories that must be told, the truths that must be faced. And so I embraced the dawn of a new chapter in Eldridge, ready to face whatever lay ahead.